The Jesse Blake Sports Report with Jesse Blake.
We have an absolute shocker, a giant doozy on our hands, because dropping in our laps on Monday afternoon is news that Aaron Ekblad, defenseman for the Florida Panthers, has been suspended for 20 games for violating the anti-drug policy. So he took something he shouldn't have taken that is against the rules. Here is the release from the National Hockey League. They said Florida Panthers defenseman Aaron Ekblad has been suspended for 20 games without pay for violating the terms of the NHL/NHLPA Performance Enhancing Substances Program. Under the terms of the collective bargaining agreement, the suspension is accompanied by mandatory referral to the NHL/NHLPA program for substance abuse and behavioral health for evaluation and possible treatment. The National Hockey League will have no further comment on this matter. And as insider Chris Johnston of SDPN and The Athletic and TSN notes, this is the first NHL player since Nate Schmidt in September of 2018 to receive a suspension for violating the league's performance-enhancing drug program. Ekblad is a pending UFA this summer. We will get into that part in a moment, but first let's read the statement from Aaron Ekblad after it was released that he would be suspended. He is suspended for 20 games. Ekblad said, "As the NHL announced, I have been suspended for violating the NHL/NHLPA Performance Enhancing Substances Program. The news that I had failed a random drug test was a shock. Ultimately, I made a mistake by taking something to help me recover from recent injuries without first checking with proper medical and team personnel. I have let my teammates, the Panthers organization, and our great fans down. For that, I am truly sorry. I've accepted responsibility for my mistake and will be fully prepared to return to my team when my suspension is over. I have learned a hard lesson and cannot wait to be back with my teammates." That is the statement from Aaron Ekblad, and now there are a number of different things that we need to talk about. Let's start with the statement itself that I just read to you from Ekblad. I am pleasantly surprised that there is no giant excuse in there, in that, like, I took male performance enhancing pills because we're trying to have children or something like that, or I was given a supplement by a trainer and they named the trainer and blah blah blah, or there was meat that was tainted, and all of the excuses we typically get from athletes when this happens. It's never, hey, yeah, I took this thing and I really shouldn't have. I should have looked up the substances or been more careful, stuff like that. We never get this from the athletes. So I think that's good that Ekblad is owning up to the entire situation. He's saying, I'm sorry, I took the wrong drug. I shouldn't have taken it, and that's it. I'm suspended. I got to move on here. And like I said, usually with these pro athletes, when they are caught taking illegal substances, it is strictly excuse after excuse after excuse, denial after denial. I never did it on purpose. It's not my fault. I'm going to appeal to the end of time, and I'm going to fight this and fight this. We didn't get that from Ekblad. So I like that. I like the statement. I like that he copped to it, and we're all moving forward. And now that we can move forward to see what this means for the Florida Panthers and the rest of the National Hockey League, Aaron Ekblad will now be eligible to return Game 3 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. The Florida Panthers are going to make the playoffs. They're first in the Atlantic Division right now, and Aaron Ekblad will be playing in Game 3 of their first round series. They have 18 games left. He's suspended for 20 games. That takes him to Game 3 of round number 1. This isn't all cut and dry that, hey, he gets some time off before the playoffs, they're going to be smooth sailing from here on out, and now he gets to return for the playoffs healthy, and the Panthers go on a magical run. It's not going to be that easy for this Panthers team because Seth Jones is a new addition who's still getting acclimatized to the organization, to the team. There needs to be a fit there, and not having Ekblad there is you're throwing in this decor cold once he comes back and they're not used to playing together. Brad Marchand, a new addition that they just acquired over the trade deadline, is injured. We don't really have a date for when he's going to come back. It's like 2 to 3 weeks right now. So who knows how much regular season hockey he's going to play with this team and how healthy he'll be once the playoffs start. And then there's Matthew Tkachuk, who is out till at least the beginning of the playoffs. Sometime in the playoffs early on, he will return. So you have 4 guys there, if we're including Ekblad, who are coming in cold to the playoffs. And these last 18 games, even though they have been playing well without Tkachuk right now, and who knows how they'll play without Ekblad right now, these last 18 games could be tough on the Panthers, and heading into the playoffs could be tough not having any chemistry beginning the Stanley Cup playoffs against a really good Tampa team, against a really good Toronto team, depending on where they finish in the standings, or against a hot Columbus team if they do end up winning division and face Columbus. There's really an opportunity for Tampa or Toronto to take advantage of this situation where Florida doesn't have Ekblad for these last 18 games and take hold of the Atlantic Division crown. Tampa has played especially well of late. Toronto's had a good regular season, but is not great right now. We'll see how tonight goes against Utah. But both of those teams have an opportunity now to feast on an injured and suspended Florida Panthers team that might falter here down the stretch. Or the Florida Panthers could just be the Florida Panthers and continue to win no matter who's in the lineup, and they could not care about this suspension at all, and a healthy Ekblad comes back for game 3 and they're all fine, and Bob stands on his head and everything's hunky-dory in Florida, and they go on to win the Stanley Cup in back-to-back years or something like that. If you are curious about the salary cap implications of the suspension, I have pulled up the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement between the players and the owners, and I've pulled up Article 50.10C about suspensions. It says, for players that are suspended either by a club or by the league, the player salary and bonuses that are not paid to such players shall not count against a club's upper limit or against the player's share for the duration of the suspension. But the club must have payroll room for such players' salary and bonuses in order for such player to be able to return to play for the club. So that means Aaron Ekblad's salary cap won't count against the Florida Panthers salary cap. And since he isn't returning in the regular season, they do not need to maintain that room to bring him back because he's not going to be coming back in the regular season. So this frees up a bunch of space for the Florida Panthers to presumably bring up players to fill the role for Ekblad. But thankfully, this didn't happen before the trade deadline because we should all be outraged as a collective non-Florida Panthers fans if this happened during the regular season before the trade deadline and the suspension leaked into the playoffs and they could just have free Aaron Ekblad cap space to add more players at the trade deadline. That would have been total shenanigans. Now they just have the ability to call up players with this salary cap space that Aaron Ekblad's salary off of the books allows them to do, but we don't get complete shenanigans where they get to add players from other teams and then add them to their playoff roster. Puckpedia tweeted that it is $8.5 million in cap space in LTIR because the Panthers are already in LTIR with the Matthew Tkachuk injury. So that is the salary cap situation with the Ekblad suspension. Let me know what you think about the suspension in the comments on YouTube, on the Jesse Blake Sports Report YouTube channel. Hit like if you're watching there right now. Hit subscribe if you are not subscribed. You can also listen to this on audio if you subscribe to the Jesse Blake Sports Report on your favorite podcast platform. That is it for me tonight. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you chose to be watching or listening right now, and I appreciate you for that. Good night from Toronto.
And that is how it's done.
The Jesse Blake Sports Report with Jesse Blake.
Jesse Blake, the guy that likes to hear his name twice in one sentence. Sure, I know him. No, he doesn't have an ego at all.